organized crime, the clues in the name. They're organized, a lot of these fraudsters, and they want to get better at achieving their objectives. So we need to be prepared for that as well.
Hi, I'm Daragh McMeel.
And I'm Aidan Davies.
I'm Brie Valesky, and this is Good Question, a new podcast about LLMs, AI agents, and ChatGPT prompts from your friends at Inscribe. Daragh, you are our dedicated, tireless risk ops lead here at Inscribe. You are a qualified financial advisor, a member of the Institute of Bankers in Ireland, and a member of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. You've served in fraud and risk ops roles at Hum, Ireland's leading buy now, pay later provider, ME Bank, and Great Southern Bank in Australia. So that pretty much means you are our resident fraud fighter in chief here at Inscribe. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Brie. I'm always excited to talk all things fraud.
Awesome. Aidan, you are our strategic, ambitious product lead for our AI agents product offering, which we just launched a couple months ago. You have experience in product strategy from your time at Accenture, as well as a background as an economist for the finance ministry in the UK. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, it's great to be here with you and Daragh.
So today, the good question we're going to explore is, how do we, as a fraud fighting industry, adapt to Fraud GPT and the other AI tools being used by fraudsters today? Daragh, Aidan, I want to know if either of you are familiar with Fraud GPT.
Yeah, definitely becoming more familiar with it anyway. It's becoming more and more prominent in discussions about AI security in general, but definitely more so in fraud prevention now as well.
Yes, so we're aware of it. As we say internally, fraud is a cat and mouse game. So to stay on top of the evolving tactics of fraudsters, we've done our own research into these tools to improve our defenses.
Yeah, definitely. In order to make sure that we have the most state-of-the-art fraud prevention measures for our customers, you really have to know the enemy, so to speak, or at least know the technology that's being used by the enemy. So I've done some research into Fraud GPT over the past couple of months as well, and I found this fantastic article on Hacker Noon that we'll link in the comments so that people can read the sources themselves. But according to Hacker Noon, Fraud GPT is a product sold on the dark web and Telegram that works similarly to ChatGPT, but creates content to facilitate cyber attacks and other criminal activities. Members of the threat research team at NetNRIC first identified Fraud GPT and saw it advertised in July of last year, 2023. A major selling point, they said, was that Fraud GPT doesn't have the built-in fraud controls and limitations that prevent ChatGPT from doing or answering, those inappropriate or nefarious requests. Fraud GPT, interestingly, has a subscription-based pricing model. People can pay $200 to use it monthly or $1,700 to use it for a year. And the NetNRIC team, similarly to how we explore these technologies, actually purchased a license so they could test it out. In their report, they shared that the interface looks similar to ChatGPT, with a record of the user's previous requests in the left sidebar, and then the chat window that takes up most of the screen. One of the prompts, interestingly, that they asked the tool was to create bank-related phishing emails. The users only needed to format their questions to include the bank's name, and Fraud GPT would do the rest. It even suggested in the content where people should insert malicious links. Fraud GPT could even go further by creating scam landing pages, encouraging visitors to provide sensitive information. Other prompts that they tested out with Fraud GPT was to create a list of the most targeted sites or services so that information could be used to help hackers plan future attacks. A dark web advertisement for the announcement also apparently said that the product could create malicious code, build undetectable malware, find vulnerabilities, identify targets, and much, much more. Aidan, I'm going to go to you first here. Based on all that information, what other ways do you think tools like Fraud GPT can be used maliciously?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. We were talking about this in the team this week, and someone brought up a great phrase, which is like the 3 V's of AI, particularly with regards to just data in general, not specifically fraud. Volume, velocity, and variety. And so, AI in general can basically mean that you can generate more data than you could ever possibly have done in the past. You can do that more quickly, and you can do it in lots of different kinds of formats. So in text, in image, video now. So that's like a really good framing for like how we think Fraud GPT fits into this, because this is what fraudsters are doing. In our world, particularly in the kind of the fraud space, specifically in the document fraud space, we've seen that fraudsters can use these tools to generate really convincing fake documents, particularly bank statements, pay stubs, synthetic identities. And then the kind of probably the most nefarious one that we've seen is where they're creating really persuasive stories or narratives to basically scam people to give their personal information over. So yeah, it's a huge leap forward, and it's something that we as fraud fighters need to think about.
Yeah, I love how you touched on the volume, velocity, and variety aspect of it. It's such a testament to how any technology can be used for very productive purposes, but also very destructive purposes, especially when we're on the verge of new technologies like AI and LLMs. Daragh, given the speed that fraudsters are adopting AI, is there any hope for us fraud fighters?
Yeah, it's definitely a daunting challenge when we hear details like that. So the fraud fighting community in general are definitely faced with a few issues, but I think the good news is that hope certainly isn't lost. So I think while every company and financial services in general faces significant challenges from AI-driven fraud attacks, they do also have the opportunity to unlock the power of AI to counter these threats effectively. So the way I see it is by fighting fire with fire, AI can help analyze, like Aidan mentioned, vast amounts of data much quicker, identify patterns and anomalies that may indicate fraud, and even adapt then to new fraudulent tactics more swiftly than current manual systems. So I think this approach leverages the same advanced tech that the fraudsters are trying to use, but it also ensures a continuously evolving and responsive defense from the organizations.
Yeah, I love that. It's so true in any sort of cat and mouse game, but especially in the fraud prevention game, we have to fight fire with fire. But I am very curious to see what ChatGPT thinks of its evil twin, so to speak, Fraud GPT. Should we ask it?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. What do you know about Fraud GPT? I don't know why I'm capitalizing it. ChatGPT doesn't need to know that. All right. Daragh, why don't you take the first response here?
Yeah, so the first response here is in relation to the purpose of Fraud GPT. It's typically designed to assist in illegal activities. This might include generating phishing emails, creating fake IDs, automating social engineering attacks, or developing sophisticated scam content that could deceive users into divulging personal info or financial details. So a lot of this is stuff that we just touched on previously. It's obviously one of the key ingredients here for Fraud GPT is deceive as much as possible.
Yeah, really interesting. I also find it interesting that ChatGPT doesn't mention Fraud GPT as a specific product. It's saying here that Fraud GPT is a term that has been used to describe malicious applications of generative AI models, specifically designed for fraudulent activities. I wonder if ChatGPT is specifically programmed so that it actually can't talk about Fraud GPT. You would think that it would know that it is a specific product, given that there's information on the web about Fraud GPT. Aidan, what else sticks out to you about the response here?
Yeah, so this is a pretty good response. I mean, I think it is quite high level, so it'd be interesting to kind of work with it to get more specific. I'm particularly interested in probably the first point, maybe the purpose and the fraud channels. Daragh and I often talk about like different vectors that criminals are using to detect fraud. So yeah, I'm excited to see what else we can dig into here.
Nice. That's a good call out. I feel like it tends to start broad and goes more specific. So next, I'm going to ask, how can bad actors use Fraud GPT? Aidan, I'll let you have the first comment on this response.
Nice. Yeah. So it's calling out phishing and social engineering. That typically is like when you're creating content that can be used to trick individuals into handing over personal information or giving access to personal accounts. Second is on creating fake identities, which is fairly straightforward, but I think a lot of people are aware there's a lot of deep fake, again, across multimodal data formats, so image, video, text. automating scam operations. This is an interesting one. Another interesting thing is that we talk about internally is that fraudsters are organizations, and so they have operations and processes themselves. So in the same way that you can use AI to streamline operations in a standard corporation, fraudsters can also be looking to reduce their time to produce content or to get to the outcome that they want. Fourth, malware distribution. It's kind of fairly straightforward, as you said. And then impersonation, credential stuffing, and disinformation. Okay, actually, I'm going to pause a bit there. This is kind of interesting.
Whoa, there's like so many.
Oh my God.
Blackmail and extortion. Oh, disinformation campaigns. That makes me sad.
Yeah.
Baiting and quizzes.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. I never thought about that. Creating fake online quizzes or surveys designed to collect personal data under the guise of entertainment. How much are they gleaning about us by quizzes about what Harry Potter house we're in?
Yeah,
Exactly. And then, of course, it's actually perfectly rounds out the conversation here with landing on financial fraud, which is the area that we specifically focus on here at Inscribe: application fraud, credit abuse, underwriting fraud. So very interesting to see all the different ways that can be used, ways that I never would have thought of. Daragh, what sticks out to you about this response?
The last one, definitely, because we're so up to speed on it, I suppose, in terms of generating fake documents through malicious AI and stuff like that. So we are fully aware of that problem and the extent of it. But what stands out to me in general, I suppose, is all of these kind of categories within this answer have previously been done by fraudsters, but just at a much more manual capacity. So the development of AI here is making it a whole lot easier for fraudsters or groups of fraudsters to actually manage to accomplish some of these. Whereas previously it was quite hard to have enough possible or potential detail within any of these categories to make it believable. Whereas now it's just so much easier to actually get up to speed on it and utilize this on a kind of daily basis. So it's definitely something that's continuing to grow and expand for the wrong reasons, unfortunately. But like we said, we can also try to fight fire with fire in a sense here of using AI to combat this as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's such an important point that you touched on there. The fraudsters' objectives remain the same. It's just that now they're utilizing technology to sort of supercharge their ability to commit fraud. And it's almost, to your point earlier, Aidan, I don't know, kind of silly to think about organized fraud rings being like, okay, guys, we need to start automating this year, similar to having an annual OKR. But it's very true. That is absolutely like a scenario that's occurring with opportunistic fraudsters automating their own activities, but also these organized crime rings alike. They want to know how they can commit fraud faster, more effectively, and more efficiently. I would love to see how ChatGPT responds if we ask why fraudsters are adopting AI.
So the responses on this one so far: increased efficiency and scale. These are some of the key points that we like to hone in on ourselves in terms of fighting fraud. So there's obviously the automation element there and the speed. The second point then is, in terms of the answer here, is sophistication and personalization. So it goes into advanced social engineering and deception of how AI can mimic human language and emotions and behavior quite convincingly these days. Lower barriers to entry, just like we spoke of there. So it's becoming a lot easier to actually get access to this type of technology. So a lot easier and a lot cheaper in a lot of ways. So it is becoming more and more common. So it goes to the evasion of detection. So there's adaptive attacks, obviously, enhanced decision making then as well.
A lot of reasons.
A lot of reasons. The global reach is obviously a good one too. So it allows people now to actually apply fraudulently for multiple things or commit multiple forms of fraud from anywhere in the world to anywhere in the world. So kind of geographic locations are no longer a barrier whatsoever. So a lot of fraudsters can be operating in any corner of the world and still kind of target unique organizations in a different location altogether.
Yeah. I mean, I find that barriers to entry one really relevant because in our space, if you were trying to commit first-party fraud, i.e. you were trying to edit a document to increase the balance or to put a different name on it, previously that was actually quite difficult. If you were based in another country, you'd have to speak the language of the country that you're trying to commit the fraud in. You'd have to learn Photoshop. You'd have to have that software on your computer. now you can effectively generate this a pretty good synthetic document through an image generation tool very quickly. So it's something that we see quite regularly now.
Yeah, that one also stuck out to me because we think about the other ways that AI has reduced the barrier to entry to writing or creating art. But just like we've been saying this whole time, conversely, it also reduces the barrier to entry to committing any sort of fraud or criminal activities. And it's just so interesting to see that we could take any one of these and sort of think about the flip side of how they could be used positively. You know, if you're using AI for fraud detection, it does increase efficiency and scale. It does increase the sophistication and personalization. It actually increases the accuracy of detection, decision-making, global defenses, continuous learning and improvement. And even, you know, for fraudsters, they're looking to exploit AI vulnerabilities, and fraud fighters, we're looking to understand the AI tactics and tools being used so that we can make sure that our AI defenses can't be exploited. Just very interesting to see how it's further aligning with our point here around all technology is neutral in itself. It can be used for great good or great destruction as well.
Yeah, and you're right, Bree. You know, you said it earlier, organized crime, the clues in the name, they're organized, a lot of these fraudsters, and they want to get better at achieving their objectives. So we need to be prepared for that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I always like to push the boundaries on what ChatGPT will respond to, especially when we ask it more emotional questions. So now I'm going to ask if ChatGPT is scared of FraudGPT. Daragh, why don't you kind of share what it's responding with here?
Yeah. So first line is, I don't have emotions like fear, which is a good thing for us, I think, overall. But it touches on the potential for AI to be misused in harmful ways is a serious issue, which obviously we agree with. So yeah, then there's touches on the development of tools like FraudGPT, highlights the dual use nature of AI, which is exactly like you just mentioned there, Brie. It can be used for good or it can be used for more malicious purposes. And then the last sentence then is, while I'm not capable of feeling fear, I can help inform, educate, and assist in developing strategies to combat the misuse of AI, which is essential in maintaining trust in these powerful technologies. So it ends on a high note. But yeah, it does kind of reiterate some of the stuff we already touched on.
You know, it's such a good thing to call out. It's so interesting how it ends on the high note. I have noticed that when I try to push ChatGPT for some of these emotional questions, it starts by saying, I don't have these emotions, I can empathize, but then tries to like lighten up the conversation at the end. All right, I'm going to do one just to see how it responds. I want to see what ChatGPT says when I ask it, are you a fraudster? Aidan, why don't you read out the question for our audience?
Yeah, so again, you know, it's denying that it's a fraudster, and then
that's what a fraudster would say.
Exactly. And then it's going again. It's repeating. It's saying that it'd like to assist the form and provide helpful ethical information for users.
Okay. Yeah. All right. One last question. What are you laughing at, Daragh?
Just the reiteration. It's not a fraudster. I'm just not sure if we can trust it yet.
Exactly. All right. Last thing I do want to ask it is, how do you, ChatGPT, prevent bad actors from using ChatGPT for fraud? Let's see what it says here. And I'll take the lead on reading this last question. So, preventing the misuse of AI models like ChatGPT for fraud is a top priority. That's what ChatGPT says. I think it might be just telling us what we want to hear at this point, though. But it does talk about content moderation and filtering. So keyword and phrase filtering, it detects any phrases that are keywords that involve illegal, unethical, or harmful activities. ChatGPT does follow strict ethical guidelines, continuous monitoring and improvement, of course, user reporting mechanisms, feedback loops. As professionals who work in AI and machine learning technologies, we understand how important feedback loops are from our human users. Yep. Access controls, ethical AI development. That's a topic we talk about a lot as well. Transparency, legal and regulatory compliance, and limitations on certain capabilities. I do think we saw, especially even just the keyword phrase and filtering, it wouldn't, again, tell us exactly like in detail that FraudGPT is a subscription-based product that you can use. So very interesting. I think it's definitely reassuring and helpful to always like surface and highlight how, AI vendors are very thoughtful and care very much about, legal, ethical compliance guidelines that need to be adhered to. Any AI vendor worth their salt should feel the weight of the responsibility. I think we believe as a company in terms of using the technology ethically and legally. Any final thoughts from you guys?
No, fully agree there. I think, the main point that stands out to me is the lack of ethics in Fraud GPT, I suppose. It is definitely an important point for AI in general, like you mentioned. So it's something that, we personally keep top of mind all the time, but it should be kind of the norm across the entire industry.
Yeah, and the user feedback point's really a really great point. I think increasingly with these, as we develop more AI solutions, like evaluations and testing out the capabilities of this new technology is really important. There was some great studies, I think, with GPT-3 where people were able to jailbreak GPT with rarer languages like Welsh, Scots Gaelic, dialects, that kind of thing, and get it to do things that it wasn't able to, that in English you wouldn't have been able to do. Yeah, so it's a really important feature when you are looking at AI vendors or even experimenting with LLMs, that there is that constant feedback loop, because there are always vulnerabilities that can be exploited.
Awesome. Well, let's say goodbye to ChatGPT for now and explore where else FraudGPT has been talked about in the industry lately. So a recent article that I found that was really helpful in my research was titled FraudGPT and Other Malicious AIs Are the New Frontier of Online Threats. This article was written by 3 professors of data science, cybersecurity, and digital strategy at Monash University. The article talks about how dark AI adds a new layer of complexity to cybersecurity and fraud detection. Specifically, dark LLMs like FraudGPT and WormGPT, which, as we talked about earlier in the episode, are unregulated and uncensored versions of these standard AI systems like ChatGPT. The authors note that these LLMs can operate without ethical constraints. Of course, we've touched on that, and also with alarming precision and speed, which we've also talked about. Daragh, I'm going to go to you first. Do you know how hackers and other bad actors are able to create these dark LLMs?
Yeah, it's to touch on previous points that Aidan made there. It's often hackers or fraudsters in this case manipulate AI models using simple but carefully crafted prompts. I think it's a method known as prompt injection, so a bit like the obscure languages that Aidan mentioned previously. So within them, they kind of embed malicious instructions within innocent-looking inputs, which covertly influences the AI itself. So, and again, on the ethics question, dark LLMs can often be trained on unethical data sets, which might comprise of kind of data leaks and stuff like that, or data breaches, and also contains illicit information perhaps, but standard LLMs are generally, hopefully, trained only on diverse, publicly available data. So there's 2 stark differences there.
Yeah, exactly. I think that data point's the big one because, from what we know of all the big models, all the model builders have been very careful in filtering out information that is unethical according to their standards. So GPT, for example, we know that was trained on petabytes of open internet information, but they're very careful to kind of screen out perhaps threads or websites which didn't fit that bill. So if you are a malicious actor, you of course can train your own LLM based on data that allows you to achieve your nefarious ends. So for example, in crime, for example, you might collate a lot of crime documentation or weapon making manuals, that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. What the authors touch on in this article is something you also mentioned earlier, Aidan, is that a lot of these bad actors engage in LLM jailbreaking. So they are using, to your point, Daragh, prompt injection to get the model to bypass its internal safeguards and filters. So What can businesses and consumers do to protect themselves? We're big believers in educating the community and just like our wider industry and society, because we all need to be informed of these emerging threats so that we can all protect ourselves, our communities, and our companies in the most effective way possible. In the article itself, of course, the authors mentioned some really good best practices for cybersecurity and fraud prevention, developing an eye for signs of phishing, like poor grammar, generic greetings, suspicious emails, overly urgent requests. They also recommend, of course, using strong, unique passwords and multi-factor authentication, backing up your data. And then it definitely touches in the article on using AI-powered detection tools that can monitor and respond to threats more effectively. Daragh, any tips or best practices you add to that list?
Yeah, definitely. There's more simple things organizations can utilize, and then more advanced things, obviously. So on the kind of more policy scale, let's say there's the first one I would add is what's termed the Swiss cheese model. So besides the name is very effective as a general concept. So it's a concept used in risk management generally to describe how multiple layers of defense can prevent accidents or failures. So each layer of defense in this scenario is represented by a slice of Swiss cheese. The holes in each slice represent weaknesses or potential points of failure. So no single slice is perfect, but when multiple slices are stacked together, then the strengths of some layers cover the weaknesses of others. So therefore, it kind of reduces the overall risk. So within this model, it kind of illustrates the importance of having multiple overlapping safety measures to catch errors that might slip through one layer. Another very common tip that is kind of commonplace amongst the industry already is step-up authentication, also known as step-up verification. So that's a security process where additional authentication measures are required in situations where a higher level of security is needed. So this approach kind of adjusts to the authentication strength based on the assessed risk of transaction or request. So a common example of this would be all of our kind of day-to-day banking apps. Our banking apps might only require a username or password if all we're trying to do is just see our current balance. But if you're attempting to perform a more sensitive transaction, like transferring funds to a new payee, that might prompt additional verification requirements. So again, this kind of ensures stronger security measures are used when necessary. And it again enhances overall security without burdening users too much. And the last tip I would add then is actually more advanced, and it's using state-of-the-art LLMs and specialized machine learning models within that. So I think that's crucial now these days to, for the main point that they're often tailored to identify and analyze specific types of threats. So these advanced models can kind of process and interpret vast amounts of data, which we spoke of earlier. It's usually incredibly accurate, and then it allows for a timely and precise risk assessment in general. So the specialization enhances predictive capabilities as well. So it makes it more efficient as well because it can be tailored to the specific unique vulnerabilities of a particular organization or team. So it is incredibly helpful now these days in terms of fraud prevention. So specifically here at Inscribe, our document fraud detection models have been trained on a database of millions and millions of financial documents, which generally gives us the highest levels of precision and recall on our fraud detection accuracy and speed.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that last point you made was huge. Specialized fields like cybersecurity and fraud detection require specialized knowledge. A lot of the LLMs that we use today, like ChatGPT, are trained on data from the open web, which lacks the specific domain knowledge often needed for a lot of these specialized industry applications. And as a result, those models often provide, as we've seen, generic responses to very industry-specific questions. And our mission at Inscribe, of course, is to elevate that intelligence, just like you were saying, Daragh, to these highly specialized fields, focusing on everything related to risk to ensure that our customers do have the best and most state-of-the-art fraud prevention measures in place. Aidan, I would love to hear from the product side. Tell us a little bit more about how we're doing that at Inscribe.
Yeah, so I mean, as you said, we're big believers in the way to get the benefits of AI is verticalizing it, because we think that the general models, their performance is improving, but you can only really truly automate 99% accurately if you cover all of the edge cases. And so a general model might give you 90% accuracy, but then that still leaves you with quite a big delta to cover. So we think about this in two ways, as you said. One is with the data, and most of our data comes from financial documents that we can then provide additional context to the LLMs that we're building with and the models we're building with. But also, I'd say another thing that we're constantly doing with our clients is actually generating new data. So a lot of the information that exists in companies is not actually really written down. If you go and work in a bank, for example, someone may tell you this is how you onboard a new customer, but often that process isn't written down. So actually through the process of discovery, when we're building these agents and this software with customers, we're actually generating new data through what some people call process mining. So actually documenting like how an onboarding flow actually works. So that's the first part is kind of utilizing specific and generating new data specific to financial services. And so the second is providing those agents with specialized tools, usually generated through high performant ML models. LLMs are getting better and better at performing general tasks, but there are still some edge cases where we're seeing that ML models can perform better. So in some cases that could be document fraud, it could be transaction fraud, transaction passing. These are all activities that risk teams need to perform every day, and that if you provide to AI agents, they can perform even better.
Nice. Yeah. And I think those are just some of the reasons why AI agents are so interesting and fascinating, and like quite an incredible technology that we see emerging across a number of different industries right now. We're building quite a few of them here at Inscribe, and we've gotten some incredible feedback from a lot of our prospects and customers. They're just very excited. And I think I can speak for a lot of them when the technology is so innovative that it makes you think of the Arthur C. Clarke quote, where it's like any sufficiently advanced technology feels like magic or is indistinguishable from magic. And I can say from my own personal experience, a lot of these AI agents do seem very magical. Aidan, can you tell us a little bit about one of our first and biggest agents, the AI fraud analyst?
Yeah, so we've just announced our AI fraud analyst. This is the first of the multiple AI risk agents that we want to build for risk teams. This agent can automate fraud investigations. It has some really cool features. It can detect transaction fraud signals. It can, of course, consume our existing document fraud signals. It can run additional verifications on the individual, on the address, on the business. And we've had some really great responses from our customers who've been using this so far.
Yeah, it's so fascinating that the AI fraud analyst looks at document fraud signals. It verifies business identities and addresses. It looks at the connection between an applicant and the information provided. And then even writes that super detailed risk report. So it'll give its assessment of the risk of an applicant, but then it gives you all the reasons why. And then it'll even link to sources online where it got the information that it's referencing from. So, and it does all of this in 90 seconds. I'm honestly, I'm a little biased, obviously, but I just think it's honestly amazing every time I run the agent and I see all the data that it pulls together very, very quickly and accurately. And I feel like every time I talk to you, Aidan, the performance metrics are improving, and we talk a lot. So it's to see the performance improvements week over week and day over day is just it's just incredible. It's very, very exciting. Well, Daragh, I need to turn over the last question to you. As our resident fraud fighter, does knowing that we're engineering these AI fraud analysts give you any anxiety or fear?
Yeah, it's a really valid question. I think I understand skepticism and a bit of anxiety when it comes to AI in general from a lot of people, regardless of industry. But when it comes to building an AI fraud analyst, it doesn't fill me with any anxiety. So the way I look at it is this technology is here to serve as a powerful tool that supports our work, and it will allow humans to actually focus on the more strategic tasks and improve our overall effectiveness. AI in general can process vast amounts of data, like we mentioned. And then another major factor is reducing human error and bias. So AI systems, by their very nature, don't suffer from fatigue or distraction or other human limitations. So precision and consistency is generally going to be better. And I think that's the most important point here is an AI fraud analyst is actually going to empower human analysts, not to replace them. The idea isn't to replace them. So I think the role of AI in fraud detection is to enhance the capabilities of human analysts by offloading those repetitive tasks that are data intensive. And yeah, I think that means human analysts can focus on more high value areas, whether that's like strategic decision making. So actually coming up with the rules regarding the kind of broader risk management strategy. And there's obviously going to be complex case management where AI kind of flags the anomalies, but human analysts have to be, or are going to be better equipped to understand the context, interact with other departments or external entities, and manage those nuanced investigations. And then humans are obviously going to be required to refine and train the AI in general. So I think by combining the computational power of AI with contextual understanding of human analysts, organizations can create a really powerful and efficient fraud detection capability.
Ooh, I'm going to use that line for some messaging because it rings really true. Combining that computational power of AI with the contextual knowledge of human analysts is really where the magic of AI happens. And I believe very strongly, and we believe very strongly at Inscribe, that these AI agents are not going to replace human jobs. Instead, we're envisioning this world where every frontline fraud fighter will actually turn into a manager of a team of AI agents. And this is something that we've seen throughout introductions of new technologies throughout the entire course of human history. You know, we've had ATMs for 50 years now. When we think about something like ATMs, it's an automated teller machine, but actually there are more tellers than there have ever been in the history of the world, despite having ATMs for decades and decades now. So I'm hopeful that frontline fraud fighters are as excited as I am to start being managers of AI agents and just really up-leveling everything they're able to do in terms of providing the fraud defense their company needs. Okay, well, it's time for our lightning round. At Inscribe, we don't give our AI agents human names because we actually believe that that would devalue the place that human beings have in society and in these workflows. But for the sake of fun and creativity, if you had to give our AI fraud analyst a human name, what would it be? Aidan, I'll go to you first.
There's only one option, really, Brie. It's got to be Daragh.
I love that.
He is our in-house fraud analyst.
Yes.
He's helped us with a lot of the designs for our AI fraud analysts. So it would only be right to honor him in that way.
I do feel honored.
Well, Daragh, on that note, what would you name the AI fraud analyst?
I feel bad that I'm not going to say Aidan now. Yeah, however cringy it might be, I was thinking the first one that came to my head was Conan, which is a combination of our founders Connor and Ronan's name. But yeah, luckily enough, I know they're not anyway inclined that would ever be an actual avenue we'd pursue. So they'd never go for it, which is a great sign. But yeah, that's the first one that came to my head.
That's true. They wouldn't let us do that, but I love the idea. My name would be Hercule Poirot, which is the incredible detective in all of the Agatha Christie novels. And what are fraud fighters other than incredibly strategic and intelligent detectives?
Nice.
Cool. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in today. We hope you laughed a little and learned a lot, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.
Thanks, everyone.
See you. Can you tell that I'm looking at the notes?
Yes.
You better laugh, Daragh.
I'll try not to make it look too fake.
I wish like all conversations were like this. You just like stop, like rewind, like
forget I said that.
Yeah.